The Life of Pablo. Released in February of 2016, this was Ye's 7th studio album. And wow, it came with more baggage than a cross-country move. Right from the jump, the album was unpredictable. The title changed multiple times. The style was chaotic. And Ye described it as a gospel album, loaded with profanity. That's one way to keep the church choir on its toes. Now, the name Pablo wasn't even clear. Was it the drug kingpin, the artist, the apostle? Even Ye seemed unsure, which honestly fits the vibe of the whole thing. The sound jumps from spiritual choirs to lyrical flexing to some deeply personal struggle, often without warning. It's messy by design, and while some critics love that rawness, others saw it as Ye abandoning all structure just to stir the pot. Plus the Taylor Swift line we all know about, where he says he made that B-word famous. Yeah, and the rollout, a full-on circus. It premiered during a fashion show at Madison Square Garden, was exclusive to one streaming service, then wasn't. Fans were told it'd never appear elsewhere, only to see it pop up on every major platform weeks later. That flip-flop landed Ye and the streaming service in a class action lawsuit for misleading subscribers. Tracks kept changing even after release, like someone editing a painting while it hangs in a museum. Some fans felt cheated, others just shrugged and refreshed the app. Then came the controversies, lyrics sparking feuds, that music video with wax figures of celebrities in bed, and of course, allegations of inflated streaming numbers. By the time the dust settled, The Life of Pablo had reshaped how artists think about albums. But not everyone was applauding. Many were just trying to figure out what version they had even listened to. Goblin. Released in May of 2011, Tyler, the creator's Goblin, marked his major label debut and lit a match under a firestorm of controversy. Right away, it split critics. Some praised its bold production and raw delivery. Others, not thrilled. The lyrics were brutal, filled with violent, graphic, and disturbing content. Tyler leaned into horrorcore, playing an unfiltered alter ego that pushed every boundary you can imagine. Much of the album is framed as a conversation with Dr. TC, a fictional therapist. But those monologues often spiraled into misogynistic, violent, and sexually aggressive territory. That alter ego defense didn't do much for folks who heard lyrics detailing rape fantasies and violent behavior toward women. Even among shock rap, Goblin managed to make people stop and go, wait, what? The track Radicals might be the most infamous, with its kill people, burn stuff, forget school hook. And that wasn't just hyperbole. Those words led to real-world consequences when a college student quoted them and got arrested. The fallout sparked renewed debate about whether this was artistic expression or something more dangerous. And then came the language. The album repeatedly used homophobic slurs. Tyler since addressed that, saying he was young and careless, but at the time, the backlash was loud. LGBTQ artists publicly called him out. Meanwhile, the UK flat out banned him for years, citing lyrics from Goblin and Bastard that they said encouraged violence and intolerance. Years later, Tyler called Goblin horrible, admitting he'd only keep a handful of tracks. Even if it's viewed now as part of his growth, there's no denying how much noise Goblin made just for existing, and how it rewrote the line between persona and artist. Straight Outta Compton. Released in January of 1989, NWA's debut studio album flipped the table on what rap could sound like, and how loud it could push back. Produced mostly by Dr. Dre and DJ Yella, it came packed with hard beats, raw storytelling, and an attitude that got the attention of fans, police, and the entire country. Before it dropped, the group had put out earlier material, but this was the one that hit like a sledgehammer. The lyrics were sharp, angry, and often profane, but they weren't just about chaos. They told stories of life in Compton. Tracks like Gangsta Gangsta and If It Ain't Rough blasted through themes of street life, survival, and defiance. But the one that stirred everything? Forget the police. The title alone got the FBI's attention. An actual letter was sent to Priority Records, claiming the song encouraged disrespect for law enforcement. The American Civil Liberties Union wasn't having it and called the government's move an attempt to silence art. Radio stations refused to play most of the album. MTV stayed away. Politicians and police tried to block shows. That censorship made it even bigger. The album didn't just get attention, it got banned in places. But fans didn't back off. Sales kept climbing. And by mid-1989, it went platinum. Later, it hit triple platinum and was added to the National Recording Registry. Still, the album wasn't without real issues. It's been criticized for misogynistic lyrics and glorifying violence. But for better or worse, Straight Outta Compton forced hip-hop into the spotlight, kicked open mainstream doors, and changed rap forever. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to be posting every day. Thanks! Anyways, Doggy Style, released in November of 1993, Snoop Doggy Dogg's debut album didn't just make waves, it came with a full tsunami of backlash. Produced mostly by Dr. Dre, it blended West Coast gangsta rap and G-Funk into a smooth but aggressive sound that topped the charts immediately. It sold over 800,000 copies in its first week and hit #1 on the Billboard 200. But behind all that commercial success was a stack of controversies just waiting to explode. The biggest flashpoint? The cartoon-style artwork. The inner sleeve showed half-human, half-dog characters engaged in acts that women's rights groups quickly condemned. Scenes depicting sex for weed exchanges and discarded women drew calls for boycotts and even sparked debates in Congress. Snoop's cousin Joe Cool designed the artwork, and Suge Knight defended it as a reflection of Snoop's persona. But critics weren't buying it. Then there's the lyrical content. Tracks like Ain't No Fun were blasted for glorifying casual sex and reducing women to objects. Some counted over 60 uses of derogatory terms for women, and that title? Not exactly subtle. The sexual themes were a feature, not a side note. Snoop was also facing a real murder charge while the album was being promoted. He was later acquitted, but the case linked the album even more closely to real-life violence. Add in lawsuits over songwriting credits and disputes over production credit, with people like Daz Dillinger claiming they were overlooked, and the storm just kept building. Despite the criticism, Doggy Style remains one of the most iconic albums of the era. Its influence on G-Funk, gangsta rap, and Snoop's laid-back delivery still echoes today, whether you agree with the message or not. 17. The debut studio album from X dropped in late August of 2017 and ran for just 22 minutes. That short runtime didn't stop it from landing at #2 on the Billboard 200, which was a pretty loud debut for something so stripped down. It's 11 tracks long, none cracking 3 minutes, with a production style that ditches hard trap beats in favor of acoustic guitars, soft piano, and minimal effects. That choice alone set it apart and got people talking. Now, the themes. This album dives straight into depression, heartbreak, grief, and the murky mental space that made X's work hit a specific nerve with listeners. He made it clear. This wasn't for getting hyped up. It was for the people feeling lost. The emotional tone stays raw, sometimes even uncomfortable. Some tracks feel intentionally unfinished, matching the chaotic headspace he was working through. The opening monologue spells it out plainly. He didn't make this for everyone. That vulnerability clashed sharply with what was happening outside the booth. X was facing serious legal issues when this album released, including charges of battery and witness tampering. That contrast sparked a lot of debate, how people should feel about separating an artist's personal life from their work. Some critics saw the album as a powerful expression. Others felt it was impossible to ignore the allegations hanging over it. Still, 17 made waves. It helped shape the emotional rap wave that followed, even though its legacy remains messy. Whether you see it as a breakthrough or a red flag, it definitely left an imprint, one that still gets people arguing. Today, the Marshall Mathers LP, released in late May of 2000, this was Eminem's third studio album, and easily one of his most controversial. It mixed horrorcore with autobiographical lyrics and leaned into a persona that blurred fiction and real life. The album sold over 1,700,000 copies in its first week and held the top Billboard spot for 8 straight weeks. That kind of impact brought a spotlight and a lot of heat. Tracks like Kim and Kill You stirred immediate backlash due to violent themes involving domestic abuse and murder. Critics pointed out the intensity wasn't subtle. It was graphic, aggressive, and personal. Lines about Columbine, threats against women, and depictions of assault triggered public concern. Even the clean version was heavily edited, but some stations still faced fines for airing it. Then came the homophobia accusations. Lyrics in Criminal especially drew fire from LGBTQ advocacy groups, with slurs that pushed boundaries even by shock rap standards. Eminem later admitted to using those words deliberately to provoke. There were also real-world consequences. His mother sued him for defamation, and political figures like Lynn Cheney called him out in Senate hearings. Canada even considered banning him. On top of that, jazz musician Jacques Lussier claimed Eminem lifted a beat from his work and demanded millions. All this led to intense debate. Was Eminem playing a character, or was this who he really was? The lines never quite get clear. But even with all the controversy, critics acknowledged the technical brilliance, and Stan left a permanent mark on culture. The chaos didn't hurt sales. In fact, it may have fueled them. This album walked the tightrope between art and outrage, and people are still arguing about it today. Untitled, Nas dropped this in mid-July of 2008 as his 9th studio album, but the title was never the plan. Originally, he intended to name the record with the full racial slur, something he announced publicly and stood by until pressure from retailers, politicians, and civil rights groups forced a change. Even with the title gone, the message stayed loud. The album, Art Alone, with lash-like scars shaped into an N across his back, made sure people knew exactly what this project was about. The themes cut deep. This album is one of Nas' most politically driven, full of lyrics about race, identity, media manipulation, and America's systemic inequalities. He samples speeches, injects historical references, and keeps that uncomfortable word present in track titles, hooks, and metaphors. Songs like Sly Fox go straight at conservative news outlet. Black President taps into the Barack Obama moment. Some production choices leaned more commercial, like Chris Brown's feature, but others carried that raw, urgent tone he's known for. Critics were split. Some praised the ambition and boldness. Others thought the execution fell short, especially compared to the pre-album mixtape. It debuted at #1 and eventually went gold, but still stirred debate over how race and art collide in hip-hop. The legacy is complicated. Untitled sparked huge discussions around censorship, responsibility, and language ownership. It's not always held up as a flawless classic, but it's remembered as a gutsy swing that forced people to engage. Whether you agree with the tactics or not, Nas made sure the conversation could not be ignored. Ready to Die. Biggie's debut album came out in mid-September of 1994 and would be the only solo project he released before his death. It blends autobiography, street tales, dark humor, and vulnerability, capturing the mindset of a young black man trying to survive a stacked deck. The album opens with a birth, closes with a suicide, and delivers everything in between. Gritty realism, lyrical bravado, and moments of bleak introspection. Tracks like Gimme the Loot, Warning, and Things Done Changed paint a picture of crime and survival. Then there's Suicidal Thoughts, which hit hard for its raw depiction of hopelessness and self-harm. Critics praised the emotional depth, but some questioned whether it glorified despair and violence. Lyrics in songs like Me and My Bitch sparked backlash over misogyny, while others saw them as brutally honest portrayals of flawed relationships. Who Shot Ya became a flashpoint. It wasn't even on the original album, but after Tupac's shooting, it was widely interpreted as a diss. Biggie and his team denied it, but the timing threw fuel on East Coast-West Coast tensions. Years later, it came out that the label may have leaned into the controversy for publicity. Legally, things got messy. In 2006, Bad Boy lost a major copyright case over samples in several tracks, forcing later editions to edit or remove those elements. That made fans argue over which version of the album holds more authenticity. Commercially, it was a breakthrough. Artistically, it helped revive East Coast rap, but it's not without contradictions. It mixed radio-ready singles with grim tales, and that tension between pop success and street storytelling made it iconic, and endlessly debated ever since. Get Rich or Die Tryin. Released in early February of 2003, this was 50 Cent's official debut, though by that point, he'd already survived 9 gunshots, been dropped by a major label, and built a name off mixtapes. The album hit with force. It debuted at #1, selling around 872,000 copies in the first week, and stayed high with another 822,000 in the second. That's not just buzz, that's domination. The album plays like a survival diary. Tracks like Many Men and What Up, Gangsta Channel, Trauma, Revenge, and Ambition, while In the Club took over every radio, club, and ringtone playlist. That single alone sat at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 9 weeks. Pimp and 21 Questions followed, balancing aggression with smoother radio-ready sounds. And yes, 21 Questions nearly didn't make the cut. Dre thought it was too soft, but 50 insisted vulnerability had its place, even in a hardened image. The album's production blended raw street edge with polished hooks, and the guest list pulled heavily from G-Unit. The narrative of survival wasn't just marketing, it ran through every lyric. This was a man who'd nearly died, and was rapping like he had nothing left to lose. Critics mostly praised the album, though some pointed at genre cliches or moments that felt formulaic. Still, it won awards, went 9 times platinum, and became the best-selling album of 2003. It also sparked backlash, some protests over violent imagery, lawsuits, even gunfire in real life. And now, 2 decades later, it's still considered one of the defining rap debuts of the era, a cultural reset with bullet holes. Montero, Lil Nas X, released his debut studio album in mid-September of 2021, but it was the lead single that lit the fuse. Montero, Call Me By Your Name, dropped in late March and hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was bold, layered, and backed by visuals that pushed every possible boundary. The video showed Lil Nas pole dancing into hell, seducing the devil, then killing him and taking his horn. Yeah, subtlety wasn't the goal. He co-directed the video and used myth, religion, and queer symbolism to flip the script, from playing both the serpent and the tempted in a Garden of Eden to reclaiming power through sexuality. The imagery told a story many weren't ready for. Critics applauded the ambition, but public backlash was immediate. Religious leaders, conservative commentators, and politicians called it immoral, blasphemous, even dangerous for kids. Some called it devil worship. Lil Nas didn't apologize. He leaned in. Then came the Satan shoes, made with MSCHF, 666 pairs, each with a drop of human blood in the sole. Nike sued. MSCHF settled. Chaos worked as marketing. Streams went up, attention followed. Even when platforms briefly removed the song, it only added fuel. Throughout the rollout, Lil Nas used viral stunts, a fake pregnancy shoot, a mock trial, all tying into a bigger campaign of self-expression through controversy. The album itself blended rap, pop, and R&B with openly queer themes, still rare in mainstream hip-hop. For some, it was liberation. For others, too much. But that tension, art versus outrage, is exactly where Montero lives. And it never flinched, as nasty as they want to be. Released in early February of 1989, this was Two Live Crew's third studio album, and the one that put them directly into the middle of a national legal firestorm. It ran over 79 minutes, was packed with sexually explicit lyrics, and became the first album in U.S. history to be declared legally obscene by a federal court. Yes, an actual court case tried to ban this record. The group produced the album themselves, leaning into Miami bass and dirty rap, heavy beats, party energy, and raw, provocative language. The track Me So Horny became a breakout hit, gaining radio play and sparking widespread attention. But it wasn't all good press. In 1990, a federal judge ruled the album obscene. That ruling was enforced in parts of Florida, and record store owners were arrested just for selling. Things escalated when 3 members of the group were arrested for performing songs live at a club. The case exploded into a national debate about censorship, free speech, and artistic expression. Eventually, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the ruling, deciding the album had serious artistic value and was protected under the First Amendment. Scholars, including Henry Louis Gates Jr., defended its cultural significance. Even David Bowie spoke out in support. Despite all the controversy, the album went platinum and charted on the Billboard 200. The clean version sold poorly in comparison, proving that people wanted the unfiltered version. Today, it's remembered as a key moment in the fight over music censorship and as one of the most legally significant albums in hip-hop history. Roman Reloaded. The album hit shelves in April of 2012 and instantly sparked debate about Nicki Minaj's direction. What threw a lot of people off was how it tried to be 2 different things at once. It kicks off with intense rap energy and the Roman Zelensky persona fully unleashed, then suddenly jumps into pop territory with songs that feel made for dance floors. That split led to claims that the album lacked a clear identity. Some longtime fans thought Nicki was chasing pop stardom at the expense of her rap roots. Others just felt the album didn't flow. Then there's the Roman persona itself. Roman Zelensky isn't new, but this was the first time that identity got center stage. Roman was dramatic, volatile, and apparently possessed. Some critics loved the theatrical angle, but others raised eyebrows over the religious and demonic imagery. The whole possession theme stirred up criticism, especially when mixed with Christian iconography. A few theological commentators went even further, saying Roman's character blurred lines in ways that could be confusing or damaging. Add to that the track linked to the Roman era that featured Eminem, where anti-gay slurs drew real backlash. The competition between Nicki and Eminem on that song added more heat, but didn't smooth over the controversy. And critics had plenty to say about the lyrics Nicki used toward women too, with some questioning how it lined up with her image of empowerment. The pop visuals and sex-forward presentation made headlines, but they also led to debates about control versus performance. Even with strong sales, not everyone was convinced the album knew what it wanted to be. 2. Apocalypse. Now, Tupac's debut album came out in November of 1991, and from the start, it rattled cages. The album didn't ease in with light topics. It hit straight into police brutality, racism, and poverty. The opening track sets the tone, spotlighting the weight placed on young black men. The album's most infamous track, Soldier's Story, sparked national outrage. After a Texas trooper was killed, the defense blamed Tupac's lyrics. That's when Vice President Dan Quayle publicly called the album dangerous. and said it had no place in society. It was a bold moment that pushed rap into the political spotlight, but that's exactly what made Tupacalypse Now stand out. It didn't try to be clean or commercial. Songs like Trapped showed how boxed, in some communities, felt, while Brenda's Got a Baby tackled neglected stories with serious depth. The production had a raw feel, leaning heavily on samples and underground-style beats. It was less polished than what came later, but it matched the message. Critics were mixed on the sound quality, but agreed the lyrics mattered. Even with modest sales at the time, the album later earned gold certification. The 25th anniversary reissue charted again, showing its lasting power. Some civic leaders accused Tupac of glamorizing violence, but fans and defenders said he was reflecting reality, not promoting it. This album didn't chase radio hits, it pushed a message. It became a blueprint for political rap and showed exactly what Tupac was going to be about. Later artists have pointed back to Tupacalypse Now as a defining influence, and it's still discussed in classrooms, documentaries, and hip-hop history circles. Its impact hasn't faded. Anghellic, this was Tech Nine's third studio album and his first national major label release. It dropped in August of 2001, but right away, people did not know what to make of it. Between the demonic imagery, the title playing off Anghellic, and Tech literally shown with horns in the artwork, some listeners jumped straight to accusations of devil worship. Tech later said those assumptions really affected how his shows were received, especially among Black audiences, where that kind of symbolism sparked serious concern. The album's dark themes did not help. From the haunting suicide letters to the unhinged storytelling in Psycho Bitch, it leaned into horror-style drama and intense emotion. A lot of listeners who were not familiar with Tech's deeper concepts just saw shock value, but the whole thing was built around inner conflict, good versus evil, light versus dark, and personal struggle. The problem was, not everyone stuck around to understand that. The release itself was also a mess. Tech's label at the time, JCOR, fumbled promotion and handling, which led to a nasty split. He ended up regaining the rights and reissuing the album as Anghellic. Reparation, under his own strange music label, that version had a few new tracks, including Devil Boy, which directly addressed the Satanism rumors. The reissue helped clear the air and let the actual concept shine. Later on, fans and underground rap critics started recognizing Anghellic as a classic. It did not play by industry rules, and that made it more real. Today, it is still seen as one of Tech's boldest and most emotional projects. Definitely misunderstood, but never forgettable. Dummy Boy. Released in late November of 2018, this was 6ix9ine's debut studio album, and it didn't roll out quietly. Originally set for a release a few days earlier, the album was leaked on his own website, leading to an unplanned early drop. That leak, combined with 6ix9ine's arrest on federal charges just a week before, turned the album into more of a media storm than a launch. Despite no promotion and a chaotic rollout, it still debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. That's wild, especially with only about 10,000 in pure sales. Musically, Dummy Boy leans heavily on features. Ye, Nicki Minaj, Lil Baby, Bobby Shmurda, huge names are all over the track list. But 6ix9ine's presence often takes a back seat. Literally, he barely appears on the final track, popping in for less than a minute. Critics noticed. Many said it felt more like a playlist branded with his name than a personal project. Lyrically, the album follows his usual style: street conflict, gang bravado, flashy lifestyle, and loud delivery. Critics called it repetitive and shallow, with more noise than substance. Tracks like Bebe and Mala were attempts at crossover appeal, but some thought they diluted his aggressive image. Others said the production was more varied than expected, thanks to names like Tay Keith and Murda Beats. The album's release timing, legal issues, and lack of rollout all shaped how people viewed it. Critics panned it, but fans streamed it into platinum status. Looking back, Dummy Boy feels more like a snapshot of a chaotic moment than a focused body of work. It's loud, messy, packed with features, and unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. We Can't Be Stopped. Released in July of 1991, this was the Ghetto Boys' third studio album, and it came wrapped in one of the most controversial covers in rap history. The photo shows Bushwick Bill in a hospital bed after being shot in the eye. The backstory: he and his girlfriend were struggling over a gun, and it went off. While he survived, the group staged the album photo shortly afterward, removing his eye patch and medical equipment just to capture the shot. Bill later said he regretted agreeing to it, calling it a painful and personal trauma. The image is still debated today as either brutally honest or blatantly exploitative. Content-wise, the album didn't hold back. Tracks tackled censorship, violence, and mental health, and didn't tiptoe around anything. Songs like Chucky borrowed from horror films, blurring lines between storytelling and shock. Critics didn't all love the graphic nature of the lyrics, but it forced conversations about what rap could portray. There was more drama behind the scenes. One of their previous albums was dropped by a label over concerns about its content, and the group responded with the title track, We Can't Be Stopped, a loud rejection of censorship. While making the album, DJ Ready Red left the group. Though he's still briefly on the title track, despite backlash, the album went platinum and cemented the group's place in hip-hop history. It also helped put Southern rap on the national radar. But debates about that cover and the album's darker themes still pop up. For some, it's artistic truth. For others, it crossed the line. Either way, it's unforgettable. It's dark and hell is hot. DMX's debut studio album landed in May of 1998 and flipped the rap world on its head. At a time when glossy, radio-friendly hip-hop was dominating, DMX came in growling, literally. His voice, full of rage, pain, and hunger, tore through every track. From the opening intro to the final bars, the album felt like a confessional and a threat at the same time. The production leaned dark and stripped down. Dame Grease, Irv Gotti, and a young Swizz Beatz helped build a sound that felt like it crawled out of a basement with something to prove. Tracks like Get At Me Dog and Rough Riders, Anthem, became street anthems overnight. But DMX wasn't just barking. On songs like Damien and The Convo, he dug into spiritual warfare, talking with the devil, arguing with God, and questioning his own soul. That raw honesty hit different. Commercially, it was a smash. The album debuted at #1 and went on to be certified 4 times platinum. Critics praised the emotional depth and rawness, saying it brought real urgency back into hip-hop. What set it apart wasn't just the aggression, it was the vulnerability underneath. DMX sounded like he was fighting for his life on every track. There wasn't a big censorship campaign, but the album's violence, religious themes, and psychological content pushed against the grain. It showed that pain could be poetic, that barking could be cathartic, and that sometimes the most powerful artist is the one who's not pretending to be okay. It wasn't clean, it wasn't polished, but it was unforgettable. Scarlet, released in September of 2023, this was Doja Cat's 4th studio album, and the most polarizing by far. Right away, she ditched her earlier pop-heavy approach and leaned into rap with no features, no sugarcoating, and a lot of pointed lyrics. Critics and fans had no shortage of opinions, but the backlash started before the first track even played. The biggest storm came from the visuals. Between devil horns, demon-heavy music videos, and cryptic symbolism, a lot of people accused her of promoting satanic themes. The Paint, the Town Red video poured gasoline on that fire, with imagery some called sacrilegious. Doja addressed it straight up in the track Demons, flipping the outrage into part of the art. But it wasn't just outside critics that caught smoke. Doja fired back at her own fans too. She publicly rejected the nickname Kittens and mocked stan culture, calling fans weird for demanding closeness. That alone caused hundreds of thousands of followers to vanish. Musically, the album received mixed praise. Some called it a bold, experimental shift. Others said it sounded too reactive, like she was rapping back at Twitter, more than building a lasting body of work. Songs like Agora Hills were praised for depth and creativity, while tracks like Balut sparked cultural criticism over misunderstood references. Critics also noted the structure felt uneven, with lyrical firepower clashing against distorted love songs and jarring transitions. Still, Scarlet debuted at #4 and made headlines for weeks. The reissue, Scarlet 2 Claude, added even more fuel. Whether it's considered bold reinvention or just chaos, Scarlet marked a sharp break from the past, and Doja clearly wanted it that way. The Devil Made Me Do It. Paris dropped his debut in October of 1990, and he didn't ease into anything. This wasn't party music. This was politically charged, aggressive, and meant to rattle cages. The title track alone set the tone. Heavy bass lines, siren-like samples, and a hook that dared people to question authority. But the fire was more than surface level. Tracks like Panther Power and Break the Grip of Shame called out systemic racism, media distortion, and internalized oppression head-on. Paris produced most of the beats himself, keeping the instrumentals sparse and moody so his voice could punch through. Samples came from funk legends like James Brown and Heatwave, but instead of using them to get bodies moving, he weaponized them. The sound was militant, cold, direct, and built for message over melody. One major controversy, the original album cover showed a cop choking a black boy. Some stores refused to carry it. Later pressings replaced it with a close-up of Paris. His video for the title track, MTV banned it. That kind of pushback wasn't just hype. It reflected real discomfort with how blunt the messaging was. Paris didn't just want to sound revolutionary, he wanted the art to act like one. The album didn't light up the charts, but it built a serious underground rap. It peaked at 158 on the Billboard 200, but hit number 20 on the rap singles chart. Years later, artists like Dead Prez and Immortal Technique would carry the same torch. If you trace protest rap in a straight line, this album is one of the stops you can't skip. Even now, its anger feels relevant. Death Certificate. Released in late October of 1991, Ice Cube's second solo album wasted no time turning heads. It sold over 100,000 copies its first week and hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, despite massive controversy surrounding its release. Structurally, the album split into 2 conceptual halves: the Death side, a grim portrait of Black America's present, and the Life side, a vision of where Ice Cube thought the community should go. It was confrontational, dense, and absolutely unapologetic. The fire started with Black Korea, which took aim at Korean-owned businesses in Black neighborhoods. That song followed the killing of Latasha Harlins earlier that year, and critics accused it of stoking racial hatred. Ice Cube would later admit the track was problematic. Then came No Vaseline, a savage diss aimed at his former group NWA and their manager Jerry Heller. Lines targeting Heller's Jewish identity got the Simon Wiesenthal Center involved, calling for stores to ban the album entirely. It didn't stop there. Songs like Alive, On Arrival, and A Bird in the Hand addressed violence, poverty, and systemic injustice. But not everything landed clean. Tracks like Horny, Lil Devil, and Look Who's Burnin' were called out for offensive portrayals, and Cube's aggressive tone sometimes turned away critics who otherwise supported his politics. European editions cut some tracks, and certain states restricted promotion, but the backlash only cemented the album's legacy. Critics still debate whether it was ahead of its time or simply wrecked. Either way, Death Certificate remains a cornerstone of political rap, bold, brutal, and still uncomfortable decades later. Ghetto D. When Master P dropped this in September of 1997, it was already his 6th studio album, but this was the one that blew the roof off. Originally titled Ghetto Dope, the name was trimmed, but the content stayed raw. It debuted low at first, but in just 1 week, it shot to number 1 on the Billboard 200, moving over 260,000 copies. By 2006, it had passed 3 million in US sales and gone triple platinum. For No Limit Records, this wasn't just a win, it was a takeover. Musically, the album was all No Limit. Master P kept it in-house, using beats by the pound to craft pounding, southern-flavored beats, built for bass systems and block parties. The lyrical themes hit the usual gangster rap territory: street survival, mourning the fallen, love, loss, hustle, and loyalty. I Miss My Homies brought real emotion with a sample of the OJ's Brandy. Nearly every track was a feature, showcasing the label's deep band. Silk the Shocker, Mystica, C Murder, Fiend, and Maya X all made noise here. The strategy worked. Ghetto D became a blueprint for building a brand through music, not just a solo record. Critics pointed out that this one was more focused and harder hitting than some of his earlier albums. It leaned darker, with street realism at the center. The original album art even stirred some pushback, reportedly needing edits in some markets. But the legacy's locked in. Ghetto D put Master P and No Limit at the top of the food chain in Southern rap. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.